Kick a little something for them cars that be bumping.
Yeah, all right, but we need a beat that they can front to. Oh, that'll work. Be funky. You know what I'm saying?
Hello, greetings and hi. This is the Head Speaks Podcast, a proud member of the Headcast Network. I am your host, Aaron Moss, also known as Head. Welcome to Head Speaks, where I'll be talking about comics, movies, and basically anything geeky. Well, without further preamble, let's get the show started.
12 o'clock at night with your windows down. Headlights breaking cause your battery's drained. Armor roll on your tires and a big gold chain.
Yo, Joe! We'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero.
And the masters of the universe.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power. Who you gonna call?
Thundercats!
Transformers. More than meets the eye. Autobots wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons.
Whatever the challenge, they are ready. The Centurions are the visionaries.
I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
And now, Geekin' with Head.
Now I know. And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
And we're going to continue on with the second part of my, what I'm calling my musical interlude portion, where again I'm going to continue looking at cartoons of my youth, and I say youth, when I was a kid and a teenager. I hope you joined us last episode when we began this journey. Let's go ahead and continue this journey with the second part.
In the near future, Doc Terror and his cyborg companion Hacker unleash their forces to conquer Earth. Only one force can stop this evil, a handful of brave men. In specially created exobrains, they can be transported anywhere. To fuse with incredible assault weapon systems beamed down from the space station Skyvault. Becoming man and machine, power extreme. Max Ray, brilliant sea operations commander. Jake Rockwell, rugged land operations specialist. Ace McCloud, daring air operations expert. Whatever the challenge, they are ready. The Centurions.
So the first show on my second part is called Centurions, in case you couldn't tell from the intro. You can tell this is a good 80s cartoon because in the intro they outline the premise of the show. They give you the bad guys, they tell you who the good guys are, and what this show's about. This was one of those 80s shows that they made a comic book of. I think it was only a few issues or something like that. I vaguely remember the comic, but I used to enjoy watching the Centurions. Looking on Wikipedia, I wasn't aware of this, but apparently legends of the comic book industry, Jack Kirby and Gil Kane, both contribute to the design and the concepts of the show. I never really knew that before. That's an interesting thing to know. Because again, as I said, they're both Jack Kirby. He helped create the Marvel Universe and did a lot of work with DC. And Gil Kane created some of the legends of DC. So, also looking on here, I wasn't aware of that. Or maybe I just forgot, but Jerry Conway, the father of Firestorm, he was one of the writers on the series also. I mean, that's really cool to find out, because again, as I've said elsewhere, Firestorm is one of my two favorite characters. To know that the man that helped create Firestorm wrote this, that explains why I like this show so much, I guess. But yeah, I ran 2 seasons, and from the intro you can tell we're in the near future, where the cyborg Doc Terror is trying to conquer the Earth, and he has a bunch of robotic helpers. It's called Doom Drones. And opposing Doc Terror is a group of superheroes. They're not really superheroes, but I guess they are superheroes. They're a group of men dressed in special metal suits called exoframes that allow them to fuse and merge, not really merge, but other pieces of equipment is beamed down and attaches to this harness that gives them abilities, if you will. As the tagline to the show says, allows them to become men and machine. Power extreme. And they started off 3 Centurions. There was Max Ray, who was their, again we hear from the intro, who was their Sea Operations Commander. He had a green power suit, and his equipment that would attach to him was undersea related and water based. Then there was Jake Rockwell, who was their land operations specialist. He had a yellow suit, and his equipment was more firepower based and more best suited for land missions. And then there's Ace McCloud, who was their air operations, who, as you can guess, he had a blue power suit, and he had like the aerial suits, helicopters and jetpacks and things like that. And they're really cool. I mean, Jake Rockwell had things that could drive. They had like wheels and things that could drive on the ground. Max Ray had things that could go underwater, and Ace McCloud could fly. And plus they had other weapons built into it. And later on they had a couple other guys, Rex Charger, who was their energy programmer, and John Thunder, who was their infiltration commander. And they were based in an orbiting space station that was called, it was called Skyvault. And it was operated by a female named Crystal Kane because, again, well, all of these shows in the 80s had to have the female support member. And she would use the transporter to beam the weapon systems down to the team members. And I remember there was a dog and a monkey of some sort. I'm trying to let me look at Wikipedia here. An orangutan that was hanging out with Crystal. Yeah, I don't remember much about. I do remember the dog and the orangutan, but I don't remember much detail about them. And again, I'm looking at Wikipedia for some of this information because it's been a while. It looks like the series ran 65 episodes, and per Wikipedia, on December the 6th of 2011, Warner Brothers released Centurions, the original miniseries. July 21st of 2015, they released Centurions Part 1 on DVD, which is the first 30 episodes of the regular series. And then upcoming on March the 15th, which actually from the day I'm recording this, just to give you a little, pull the curtain back, is about 10 days, they're supposed to release Centurions Part 2, which is the last 35 episodes of the series. That may be something I may have to look for and track down and buy those two, because, again, I really enjoyed this show when it was on. If you haven't seen Centurions, go check it out. I'm sure you can find them on YouTube, or, again, they've got the videos out. Again, it was your. I said I love the series, but it was your standard, Doc Terror's trying to take over the world. The Centurions have to stop them. There's an important message each episode. So, I mean, while it was standard fare as far as that goes, I really enjoyed the stories. I enjoyed the way the weapons, they'd materialize and they would hook into the harnesses, or the power frame, whatever you want to call it, the exo frame. I thought it was very good. So definitely recommend checking out Centurions. Power extreme. But that's a more modern show. From that, we're going to go ahead and jump back in time a little bit. This next one, I don't entirely remember this next theme song very much. I remember the beat of it, but anyway, check this out, guys.
Come on and see
Tennessee Tuxedo, C, Tennessee Tuxedo. He will be parachuting for your pleasure, sailing seas in search of treasure, anything so he can measure up to men. That's Tennessee Tuxedo, the small penguin who tries but can't succeed, although he may fail. As he vies for fame and glory, still he tries in each new story tale.
Tennessee Tuxedo. This was a cartoon, ran from 63 to 66. Those that know me know I wasn't born until 69, so I didn't watch these in original showings. But growing up, these were always on Fox or one of the other channels I got when we got cable. You'd always find this on somewhere. Tennessee Tuxedo was a series around a penguin named Tennessee Tuxedo and his best friend, who was a walrus named Chumley. Tennessee Tuxedo was voiced by the famous at the time Don Adams. Don Adams, again, if you grew up in the 60s and 70s, you probably know him from, I really know him from the TV show Get Smart. But he was a lot of other shows, and he was very I want to say popular. Maybe it was just me, because he did a lot of voiceover work, and I don't know, I just remember Don Adams. And again, he did the voice of Tennessee Tuxedo, and they lived at the Megalopolis Zoo that was ran by the zoo director Stanley Livingston. And he had an assistant named Flunky. And basically the Tennessee Tuxedo would be tales of Tennessee and Chumley trying to escape the zoo. And not that they wanted to go back where they originally came from, but they would escape the zoo to go out in the outside world. And I remember he had a rival, a kangaroo rat named Jorba, and Jorba had an assistant, a tiger named Tiger Tornado. And then there was a gangster who they often ran across named Rocky Maninoff. So it was good stories. It was semi-educational. They would need to do something, try to come up with some scheme. They would fail. They would end up going and visit this professor, the friend of theirs. I want to say he was a professor. His name was Phineas J. Whoopi. He was a man who had all the answers. He basically he knew a little bit of everything about everything. And I remember he'd always, to help him figure things out or to diagram things for him, he'd pull out a chalkboard he could expand. If I remember right, he was the one that would open up a closet sometimes and things would come piling out of it. And so they would, Phineas would give a little lesson to Phineas. Sorry, he'd give a lesson to himself? No. Phineas would give a lesson to Tennessee Tuxedo and Chumley and the kids watching. And you would learn a little something about life and about how things work. And Tennessee Tuxedo, when he got done listening to Phineas's lecture, conversation, whatever you want to call it, he would always say, "Phineas J. Whoopi, you're the greatest." Still makes me smile. But again, that's one of the shows, as I was growing up, I remember this from an early age, whenever it would come on, I'd have to watch it, because I just loved watching these shows. Even if I watched the same episodes over and over, it was a fun show. I enjoyed it. It was a group of shows that, from before I was born, that would play in rerun syndication, that I loved watching as a kid, as a teenager. I haven't seen them in years, except for when I look them on YouTube for this, but even looking back now, they still make me smile. Speaking of that time frame, let's let's look at another show. This, if you don't recognize, this is from Fractured Fairy Tales. This was a segment on Bullwinkle and Rocky, or the Bullwinkle Show. There was other segments including Deadly Do-Right, Peabody's Improbable History, which the Mr. Peabody recent movie is an adaptation of. And then this, the one I just played, Fractured Fairy Tale. And it's basically, they take classic fairy tales and they retell them in a newer, modern, well, for the 50s and 60s, modern fashion. Again, this, as I said, this was on in the late 50s, early 60s originally. I watched these again in syndication later on. I remember the Fractured Fairy Tales. I think there was a couple different openings. The one I pulled this from was a fairy or something pulls a book out, opens it up, and has a problem. The book keeps trying to close. I vaguely remember there was a couple different versions of the opening on that one, though. And again, I don't have much to say about it. I really enjoyed these shows. The show was was narrated by Edward Horton. And like I say, I don't have a lot to say about this. It's when as I was talking about Tennessee Tuxedo, I remembered this one, and I wanted to play this also. I just wanted to look it up. If you get time, look it up on YouTube, Fractured Fairy Tales. Like I said, I haven't sat down and watched one of these in years, but I really remember enjoying them. Like I said, they take a classic fairy tale and they would put a modern, again, for late 60s or late 50s, early 60s, modern spin on it and make it more humorous. Fractured Fairy Tales, that was, again, I enjoyed that. But enough of this silliness. Let's go ahead and get back to some more modern, again, I say modern when I was a kid and teenager.
From days of long ago, from uncharted regions of the universe, comes a legend. The legend of Voltron, defender of the universe. A mighty robot, loved by good, feared by evil. As Voltron's legend grew, peace settled across the galaxy. On planet Earth, a galaxy alliance was formed. Together with the good planets of the solar system, they maintained peace throughout the universe. Until a new, horrible menace threatened the galaxy. Voltron was needed once more. This is the story of the super force of space explorers. Specially trained and sent by the Alliance to bring back Voltron, defender of the universe.
Voltron, I remember you well. Voltron was a futuristic, or not really futuristic, but a space story, if you will, about these robots or vehicles that would form into a giant robot called Voltron. He was also known as Voltron, Defender of the Universe. The ones I remember the most and love was what was called the Lion Force Voltron, which was 5 lions, robotic lions. It was piloted by these guys and girl, and they would defend the universe. And again, my memory's a little fuzzy. I always seem to remember this as being the last version of Voltron. Looking on Wikipedia, this was actually apparently the first series that aired here in America. I say here in America because these are all based on Japanese shows. There was also the Vehicle Force Voltron, which apparently was the second series, which, again, I always thought that was the first one. And it was made up of cars and planes and jets and things that would form into a giant robot. I didn't care for that one as much for some reason. I don't know. It took like 15 vehicles to form Voltron. But back to the one I enjoyed, the Lion Force. As I said, there was 5 lions. They were piloted by 5 young pilots. And they would fight to protect the planet Arus from the evil King Zarkon, who ruled from the planet Doom. Zarkon also had his son Lotar and his henchwoman Hagar, who was a witch who would help him out. And she would create these huge, what's called robo-beasts, to terrorize people of the planet. Basically, the show was basically the same. To take over the planet, Zarkon and Hagar and Lotar would send robo-beasts after the planet Argus. The lions would show up. They'd do a little fight. They would come up on the losing end. They would form Voltron, Blazing Sword, and they would defeat the robo-beasts. Their crew of Voltron, there was Lance, Keith, Hunk, the little guy Pidge, and then Princess Allura were the pilots of the Lion Craft. Again, I really enjoyed Voltron. They had action figures. I never got around to getting any of the actual figures. I wanted them, but I never got that far. But yeah, I really loved Voltron. Again, it was from the same time period as Thundercats and Silverhawks. Just looking real quick, it looks like it ran from 84 and 85. There's 3 seasons, it looks like. But again, I always seem to remember the lions being the last of the Voltron, but according to Wikipedia, the Lion Force was the first one that was aired here in America, so I don't remember. Anyways, and I know they tried to bring it back. There was a Voltron Go or something that came out a couple of years ago. It was okay. I don't know. It was a little more Japanese animation-y and just wasn't as good in my opinion. And apparently on January 5th of this year, Netflix has announced that Voltron is going to come out as an animated original Netflix series. So I'm excited to hear about that. I definitely want to check that out. But yeah, I still love Voltron. Again, I wasn't happy with the Voltron Force, whatever the newer one was called. But the original Voltron with the lions, it just gives me the warm fuzzy whenever I think about it, whenever I see the toys or the cartoon or the pictures of it. There's been several comic books. In fact, there's one I just started looking at. I haven't read it yet, but I got copies of it. It's Voltron Force, or Voltron from the Ashes I want to check out. But yeah, I definitely recommend Voltron if you're interested in some space opera, giant robot Japanese type stories. Because again, these are all taken from Japanese and dubbed over to American voice, if I'm not mistaken. So go Voltron. Head Speaks will be back after these important messages.
Hi friends, it's your old pal, Adam Worth. You may remember me from podcasts like Comic Book Fight Club, The Quantum Cast, and the thousands of other shows I somehow get roped into making guest appearances on. The podcasting world has been very good to me, and I feel it's about time that I give back. So coming this spring, I'll be helping to make the world a better place with my new show, The Bad Advice Show. Join me and a few choice panelists as we answer your questions on life, love, relationships, history, life hacks, and politics. Really, whatever topics you feel you would like to get my valued opinion on. So hop on the advice train as we make the world a better place coming this spring to an internet streaming device near you. To have your questions answered on The Bad Advice Show, send us an email at thebadadviceshow@yahoo.com. That's thebadadviceshow@yahoo.com. And remember, kids, if you want to remain anonymous, don't tell me your name.
Justice League International Bwahaha Podcast, a new monthly show chronicling the adventures of the JLI era by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis. We'll be going issue by issue in release order, tackling the core Justice League title, Justice League Europe, and the quarterly book. Along the way, we'll take time out for special episodes covering various spin-offs, cartoon appearances, the infamous TV pilot, and much more. So join me in an ever-changing roster of guest hosts as we celebrate your favorite JLI members, such as
Martian Manhunter,
Batman,
Dr. Fate,
Black Canary,
Fire,
Ice,
Maxwell Lord,
Oberon,
Captain Marvel,
Rocket Red,
Captain Atom,
Mr. Miracle,
Guy Gardner,
Booster Gold,
Blue Beetle,
Nort,
and many, many more. Justice League International Bwahaha Podcast, coming March 2016 as part of the Fire and Water Podcast Network. Want to make something of it?
And now back to Head Speaks. But we'll move on from Voltron.
Hey, look! A Dungeons and Dragons ride! Wow, neat!
Give me a break.
I don't like this!
Whoa! What's happening? Whoa! Where are we? Look out!
Fear not, stranger. Barbarian, magician, thief, cavalier, and acrobat.
Who was that?
That was Venger, the force of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons. I used to play the role-playing game when I was younger. DM'd a little bit, played. So when the cartoon came out, I had to check it out. And overall, I remember enjoying it. My biggest problem was, well, one is that when it ended without giving a resolution. They never actually got home or anything. Reading on Wikipedia, I found out that spoilers for a 30-year-old cartoon, that apparently there was a fourth season was written and they were set to go home and decided to stay, and that was all set up to be a status quo change, but it wasn't renewed for a fourth season, so unfortunately we never saw that or saw what happened. So Dungeons and Dragons, I gave my brief. I enjoyed it, but let's go ahead and give a little more information on it. The Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and again I'm pulling this from Wikipedia because my memory is very faulty as usual. It came out in 1983 through 85 on CBS and ran 27 episodes. And what I remember from the show, there was 6 friends, and again they take at the beginning of every episode another one of those 80s shows where it gave you a brief this is what's going on. 6 friends get in a ride, I forget the name of it, and they end up in the land of Dungeons and Dragons, if you will. And there they meet their guide called the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master in the game was the person who created the realm and walked the players through the game. And that's basically what the Dungeon Master here did. I say part of my problem, as I said, was they never got home. Another part was there was always hints that they could get home, but they never materialized. That got a little boring, I think. A little monotonous. I don't know. But the characters in the story, there was Hank the Ranger, who was voiced by Willie Ames from Eight is Enough, if I'm not mistaken. Eric the Cavalier was voiced by Don Most, who you may know from Happy Days as Ralph Mouth. And then there was Sheila the Thief, Diana the Acrobat, Presto the Magician, which was voiced by Adam Rich, who, if I'm not mistaken, was the young kid in It Is Enough. And Bobby the Barbarian, voiced by Ted Field III. I didn't say who voiced other characters because I didn't know any of them. None of the names sound familiar, so I don't care. And during the episodes, I think one of the first episodes, they found a little baby unicorn called Uni, the unicorn, who was voiced by Frank Welker, who did a lot of these cartoons back in the day. And as I said, there was also the Dungeon Master, who kind of helped him out without actually telling him anything. And the villains in this show, there was Venjar, who was a voice for evil, who was voiced by Peter Cullen, who was, if I'm not mistaken, Optimus Prime in the Transformers cartoon. And we find out, again, spoilers for, again, a 30-year-old show. Apparently we find out near the end that Venjar was the Dungeon Master's son. He's a great evil wizard who's trying to get the children's magical weapons to bolster his own power. And then there was Shadow Demon, who is Venjar's personal spy and assistant. And then there was also Tiamat, who was also voiced by Frank Welker. And Tiamat was a 5-headed dragon with multiple different colored heads and different things. There was a white head that breathed fire. Sorry, try that again. A white head that breathed ice. A green head that breathed toxic gas. The red head was the main one, which breathed fire. The blue head breathed lightning, and a black head breathing acid. And Tiamat was, well, she did fight against the children. She was also, didn't care much for Venjar, so that a lot of times the kids would use Tiamat to get away from Venjar. Venjar, however you want to pronounce it. And again, apparently, according to Wikipedia, the level of violence was controversial for American children's television at the time. And one of the scripts was almost shelved because the characters contemplated killing the villain, Venjar. And apparently in '85, the National Coalition on Television Violence demanded the FTC run a warning during each broadcast stating that the Dungeons and Dragons had been linked to real-life violent deaths. I say yes on that. But these coalitions could be a bit of a problem. I'm not getting into that at this point. Again, I'm here to talk and praise the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Again, the animation in this was very good for the time. The voice acting was very good. The scripts, again, I haven't really sat down and watched these episodes in 30 years, so I could be wrong. But I remember the scripts, for the most part, were decent. There was a lot of same old about them. The kids had a way maybe to get home. Something stopped them from going home. Rinse, repeat. But I enjoyed Dungeons and Dragons whenever I see the ad for this or the commercial, whatever. It makes me smile. I've been wanting to sit down and watch some of these. I've got a way to watch them, but I just haven't had time. Between my podcast and working in the family, I don't have much free time. In fact, I'm behind on my current comic reading because I'm reading all these back issues for my other podcasts. So, not that I'm complaining, because I'm really enjoying what I'm reading. So, but again, so this show was based on the role-playing game. And speaking of the National Coalition to End Fun, or whatever it was called, giving the FTC grief about this, I know the role-playing game had similar issues with parenting groups and other coalitions thinking that the game was bad and causing kids to do bad things and worship the devil and all this other BS. But again, that's another rant for another time, I guess. Back to this show. Again, as I said, there was the 6 characters. Hank was the oldest of the kids. He was their natural leader. He was the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, the moral arrow of the show, if you will. He was the ranger. He had a magic bow that shoots arrows of glowing energy, and they do different things with him. There was, as I said, Eric, who was the spoiled child. He was a bit of a pain. He came from a rich home. He's the big mouth coward of the show, also kind of the comic relief. And again, Eric was the one always kind of annoyed me because, again, he well, like as I said, very egotistical, very, opinionated. but he didn't seem to be the bravest of the lot. So he got kind of on my nerves at times. And then you have Sheila, which was a young girl who had a cloak who would make her turn invisible. And she was Bobby's sister. Sheila, or Diana the Acrobat. She was about a 14-year-old girl, very outspoken and boyish, or tomboyish. And she had a magical staff which could change in length from a few inches to a few feet. And she could use it to pole vault over things, use it as a weapon. And according to Wikipedia, because again I don't remember this part offhand, but the staff is never broken apart. Diana simply has to touch the pieces together, and they'll reunite. Presto the Magician was the character's name was Albert, but they called him Presto. He was the well-meaning, diligent, but hopeless magician. He had low confidence and nervous. He had a magic hat that he was able to pull things out of. And sometimes they didn't seem very useful. Seems like he'd mess up a lot, but things would turn out and be actually useful for him. So I like Presto. Always like the magician in D&D. The magic users, whatever you want to call them. They had different names, but again, here he was the magician. I always enjoyed the magician character, because when I was about that age, I actually wanted to get into magic and be a magician myself, so I think that kind of had a pull to me. Bobby, as I said, he was the youngest of the team. He's a young kid. According to this, he said he celebrates his 8th birthday in one episode. He wears fur pants and boots, a horned helmet, and a crossbow harness. He's very impulsive, ready to run into trouble no matter what it is, because again, he's the barbarian. He thinks with his fist and not his brain. He's one that had a really close relationship with their pet unicorn, Uni. And Bobby's weapon was a magic club, which he can use to trigger earthquakes, dislodge rocks when striking the ground. He's just a very, very powerful, just a barbarian. And then Uni was a pet unicorn, as I said, that they found in the first episode, and it becomes their companion. She has the ability to speak, though her words aren't quite discernible. And we find out that she has the natural unicorn ability to teleport once a day. And so she's helped about once or twice that way. And then, as I said, the Dungeon Master, he was very much the Yoda of the group. He would give them cryptic answers, wouldn't really answer their questions. He would give them more of a puzzle to solve to get the answer. Whether because he wasn't as powerful as he thought he was, and he was just BSing them, or he was really an asshat. I don't know which it is, but yeah, he never really seemed to want to actually give them the answers. Yeah, give them a riddle, or you will solve this quest, and this may help you find your way home. Fool, just tell us how to get home. And from the show, basically, the Dungeon Master appears and pulled him to this reality to help him stop Venjor, and we find out, I remember we found out if that was done in the episode, that he wanted the kids to help him redeem Venjor and destroy the evil in the land. But again, that was Dungeons and Dragons, another show I really enjoyed. I definitely recommend if you can get that, check it out. It is on DVD, again, per Wikipedia. The most recent, June of 2009, Mill Creek Entertainment released the complete series. Let me see, it looked like they released it in August. There was a 3-disc set without any special features, with all the original music restored. A previous version that came out, while it had all the original music, or no, try that again. It had some special features and some commentary. It didn't have any of the, not any, but some of the later music was switched out for generic music because of licensing rights. So, and also looks like one of the earlier episodes had the radio play Requiem on it. Requiem was the unproduced final episode that somewhere along the way got made into a radio play. There's a script online for if you want to read it. But Dungeons and Dragons, I definitely recommend checking that one out. I think it's a good show, especially if you enjoyed the Dungeons and Dragons role-playing game. There was a lot of things as you watched that, hey, I seen that, I remember that from the game. So that was Dungeons and Dragons. We'll move on to our next one.
And the Masters of the Universe. I am Adam, Prince of Eternia and defender of the secrets of Castle Grayskull. This is Cringer, my fearless friend. Fabulous secret powers were revealed to me the day I held aloft my magic sword and said, "By the power of Grayskull!" Cringer became the mighty Battle Cat, and I became He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. Only 3 others share this secret. Our friends, the Sorceress, Man-at-Arms, and Orko. Together we defend Castle Grayskull from the evil forces of Skeletor.
He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Another cartoon I fondly remember. I watched the cartoon. I read some of the comics later on when I got into comics. I wanted the action figures, but again, I was 13 at the time when they came out. I remember asking for them. My mom said I was getting a bit old for action figures and toys like that, so she never did get them for me. So I never really ended up with any of the toys. Thanks, Mom. But yes, He-Man. Another cartoon I really enjoyed. He had a spin-off called She-Ra, which focused on his twin sister. They found out later on. In fact, my daughter loves She-Ra. We bought her the first season on DVD because she loves that show so much. In fact, a lot of times she's sitting there playing that she's She-Ra, or in fact, my daughter, a lot of times she's Swiftwind, the horse. Anyways, He-Man takes place on the planet Eternia, a place of magic, myth, and fantasy. The main character's name is Prince Adam, who has a sword. When he raised in the air, it says, "By the power of Grayskull." He turns into He-Man. He gets his power from Castle Grayskull, and he can use the sword to transform his. He's got a pet cat named Cringer. He can transform him into a battle cat. He-Man pretty much seems like he's the same person when he changes. Prince Adam acts a little more weaker and a little more cowardly, but a lot of that's just so he can run off and change into He-Man. Whereas Cringer is a cowardly tiger who's always afraid and hiding, and then when he turns into Battle Cat, he's actually tough and ferocious and can kick some butt. He-Man, I've got to point out real quick before we get any further, if you haven't seen the cartoon, He-Man is very much a Superman / Conan type character. He's very much a Conan type character, but he's got the secret identity like Superman. And a lot of people ridicule Superman because all he's doing is putting on glasses. You can be able to tell who he is. Not really. In my opinion, if you watch the 1979 Christopher Reeve Superman, when he takes the glasses off and he stands a little taller, becomes Superman, to me, I can actually see a change. It looks like a different person almost. I don't see that with He-Man. When Prince Adam changes into He-Man, his pink clothes disappears and he's wearing a loincloth and has a sword. And he always has a sword anyway, so I mean, his hair is the same, his face is the same. It's just his clothes changes and no one recognizes who this is. To me, that's a bigger secret identity mistake than Superman's ever is. But again, if you accept the identity try that again. If you accept the theory of secret identities, then I guess it's not too long of a shot. But I mean, again, it does stretch the whole secret identity thing to a point of, I don't know about that. He-Man fights Skeletor. Skeletor's main goal is to try to gain entrance to the Castle Grayskull, so he could try to rule Eternia and possibly the entire universe. So He-Man's associates and helpers, there's Man-at-Arms, who works with the King and Queen, Man-at-Arms' daughter Teela, and there's others such as Zodiac, Stratos, Man-E-Faces, Ram-Man, Buzz-Off, and so forth. There's also a little magician character in this show called Orko, who is a little, I guess it is in a parallel dimension called Trolla. He's just, the character itself, he's got like a magenta colored cloak with a big O in the front of it. His hands come out the sleeves. He's got a big red floppy hat on, magician's hat, a purplish scarf, and he's got some eyes that you can see and some pointy bluish ears that are sticking out the top of the mask, the head. The hat. Looking at Wikipedia, he wasn't originally part of the toys. He came out when the cartoon came out, which, again, there's another one of those that they created the cartoon to help sell the toys. And Orko, again, he was the magic user, but kind of like Presto from Dungeons and Dragons, but more so. Orko's magic spells usually didn't seem to work right. It would usually backfire, or he just wasn't that good at it for whatever reason. But Orko, he was also kind of the comedy relief of the show. I enjoy, even though he was annoying, I enjoyed Orko. But this isn't about Orko, this is about He-Man. Again, He-Man would fight Skeletor, and Skeletor had other people helping him, such as Beastman, who was kind of his right hand, if I'm not mistaken, who was a giant beast-looking guy. Merman. Skeletor had his own sorcerer person named Evelyn. There's Triclops, Trapjaw, Jitsu, Whipclaw, and these all had different action figures associated with them, and a lot of them had different powers or whatever, different little features of the toy. One could spin, one his head would move. So it was again the show was made to help promote the toys, like most of these shows at the time. But again, I enjoyed the cartoon. The toys were really cool to look at. They were larger figures than like the G.I. Joes and the Superpowers and all that. But they had a movie that came out back in 1987, just called Masters of the Universe. I remember watching it when it came out. It starred Dolph Lundgren as He-Man and Frank Langella as Skeletor. I haven't seen it in decades. 90, 2000. Yeah, it's probably been a good couple of decades since I've seen it. My mom always told me, if you can't say nothing nice, don't say anything at all. So I don't want to say too much about this movie. I don't seem to remember liking it at all. I remember a lot of it was based on Earth. It had Courtney Cox in it as a young teenager that was helping He-Man and his Man-at-Arms and Teela try to find this magic key. I remember it was music-based. I don't remember all the details on it. In fact, I just listened on Now Playing podcast. They talked about it recently. Masters of the Universe. Yeah, that wasn't a good movie. I've tried to block a lot of it out. But anyways, let's move on from there. There's rumors they're trying to maybe do a new movie on it. I don't know if that's ever going to come through or not. As bad as the old one was, may not. I don't know. But I guess that's all I got to say about He-Man. Hold on, let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
his amazing friend, Iceman and Firestar. Spider-Man and his amazing friend.
Again, before I collected comics, this is one of those shows I remember. Spider-Man, no matter who you were, Spider-Man was one of the big ones. You knew Spider-Man, even if you weren't into comics. So I remember watching the show on TV in 81. The show was starring Spider-Man and had the other characters, Iceman and Firestar, who it looks like from what I seen was actually made up for the show. Again, I didn't notice at the time because I wasn't into the comics. I knew Iceman from the X-Men. I remember seeing him around. But again, it was basically Spider-Man or Peter Parker. Remember, Peter Parker and Bobby Drake and Angelica Jones were college students. And I want to say they lived together. I'm just looking at Wikipedia here. I don't remember right offhand. I remember they lived together. I remember they had a hidden computer and all that. And yeah, it looked like they lived in Aunt May's home. And yeah, there was the pet dog, Ms. Lion. And again, after their first team up to defeat the Beetle, they decided to become a super team. And they fought all the time as the Spider Friends, if you were. And other stories from the time, they featured other Marvel characters such as Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, the X-Men from the time period. Again, looking on Wikipedia, and I've heard this before, but the years have robbed my memory. It looks like they created Firestar because they wanted to use the Human Torch, who was unavailable due to licensing reasons. The original plan, it looks like, was for Spider-Man to have fire and ice-based teammates, so they couldn't get Human Torch, so they used Firestar instead. And then she came into the comics a couple years later. One of the ones that, again, these are one of the characters that appeared outside of the comic industry, and they were so popular they decided to adopt them into the comics, which is really cool. But Spider-Man, they used a lot of the characters from the comic books. They had some of their own they made up. Again, I really enjoyed Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. That was one of my first, not my first speaking of Spider-Man, because there was the Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man TV show. But not a lot to say about it. It was a good show. It was decent animation for the time. Decent writing. Again, it wasn't top-notch, but it was enjoyable. If you get a chance, definitely check out Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. But I think that's going to do it for this episode. Check us out next time when I continue my list. Head Speaks will be back after these important messages.
Oh yeah. Feels good. The time has come to enjoy myself.
Hello, greetings and hi there. This is the Head Speaks podcast. Hey there, true believers. Welcome to the Task Force X Headcast. G.I. Joe, the Real American Headcast, is the code name for Aaron's daring, highly trained headcast.
Hello there, my name is Aaron Moss, and this is the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour.
Hello, my name is Alexis Mox. This is my show called Alexis Speak.
And all of these shows can be found on the Headcast Network. Look for it on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Also on Facebook by looking for the Headcast Networks. All of the great Headcasts that you love on one convenient feed. Look for it. The Headcast Network. See you there.
Do you want to hear the origin of Superman or Batman? Of course not. You're listening to a geek culture podcast. You know the origins of Superman and Batman. You've always known them. Your unborn grandchildren know the origins of Superman and Batman. But what about Guy Gardner, Blue Beetle, or the Phantom Stranger? What about Firestorm, Sandman, or the Golden Age Fury? Those are just a few of the stories covered in the Secret Origins podcast, a review show dedicated to the Secret Origins comic published by DC in the 1980s. Each episode of the Secret Origins podcast features me, Ryan Daly, and an all-star collection of guest hosts revealing or revisiting the legends of the DC superheroes and villains. And if you're already sick of hearing my voice on this promo, the good news is at least 50% of the talking on the Secret Origins podcast is done by a terrific guest from the podcast and blogging community. So check out the Secret Origins podcast, available on iTunes and at secretoriginspodcast.wordpress.com.
And now back to Head Speaks. Let's move on to our next segment.
On your mark, get set. We're riding on the internet.
The internet is really, really great.
For porn.
I got a fast connection so I don't have to wait.
For porn.
What? There's always some new site.
For porn.
I browse all day and night.
For porn.
It's like I'm surfing at the speed of light.
For porn.
Internet porn, Roman orgy scenes. Internet porn, dominatrix queens. Internet porn, girl on girl on girl on girl on girl on guy on sheep.
You're going surfing on the internet.
Where is Head going?
This week on Where's Head Going, we're going to look at another podcast I listen to. This one is a buddy of mine. I'm going to call him a buddy. We do a podcast together, so I think that's all right. Ryan Daly. And we're going to talk about his Secret Origins podcast. On Ryan's Secret Origins podcast, basically it's a weekly podcast where he looks at DC's comic Secret Origins, which came out in the late 80s, early 90s. Again, the era of DC Comics that I love. That's when I got started. And he looks at a different issue each week with a different rotating cast of co-hosts. Usually there's 2 stories normally in each comic, and he has a different co-host for each comic. I personally have been on 2 different episodes so far. Episode 14, talking about the Suicide Squad, and episode 28, talking about Nightshade, who's also a member of the Suicide Squad. And I should be showing up around episode 37, talking about another Suicide Squad member, Dr. Light. But again, it's a great podcast. I enjoy listening to it, even the ones I'm not on. They've covered such heroes such as the Blue Beetle, the Golden Age Superman, Firestorm, one of my favorites. They just covered the Ray Palmer Atom, who I love. And again, Ryan's got some great insights. His guests have some great insights to the characters. And usually his co-hosts have some sort of tie. Most of them have podcasts or blogs or something dedicated to these characters. So, again, it's a weekly podcast called Secret Origins Podcast. I definitely recommend checking it out. In fact, I haven't listened to his latest one, but he just released one that covers the second annual, which is the origin of the Flash. Definitely looking forward to listening to that one. But yeah, go check out Ryan Daly's Secret Origins Podcast. It's a great show, a great host, and great co-hosts showing up. So Anyways, that'll do it for Where Head's Going. Let's go ahead and move over to the mailbag, such as it is.
Mail time. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time. The mail's here.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
You've got mail. As I said, this episode of the mailbag is going to be a short one. I don't have a lot of comments or emails or anything. I will point out, again, some of these may be repeats possibly from last month. I don't recall if I did one last month. So you know what? I've got the little time. It's my podcast. What the heck? So we're going to go ahead and give some shout outs from some Facebook comments and likes to Ryan Daly, a buddy of mine, Amanda Downing, the Quantum Cast, which is another great podcast, Gene Hendricks, who again, Gene Hendricks has a couple of different podcasts. He's part of the Quantum Cast. He's got his own other podcast he works on, The Hammer Strikes, which I've been on in the past. Definitely check out Gene Hendricks' shows. And then our buddy Shag Matthews from over on the Fire and Water podcast network. And that's it for Facebook likes, comments, and all that good jazz. Also, since we're here and we have a little time, since I don't have any emails, I'm going to go through my Headcast network and read off everybody that's liked the Headcast network page. Some of these may be repeats from some other shows, but you know what? These guys like my Headcast network. These guys deserve some special shout outs. So I'm just going to read through this list. There's James Lee Kernod, Michael Bailey, who is, I've said elsewhere, one of the spiritual godfathers of my network. He's got a show called From Crisis to Crisis, Superman podcast, which is one of the first shows I started listening to when I got into listening to podcasts. And for good or ill, that's kind of why I try to emulate on my podcast. Maybe not as well, but I try. He's also got another show called From Views from the Long Box, where he talks about geek-related things and whatever crosses his mind. And that's kind of also a spiritual inspiration for this show, even though I didn't come across that one until later. But anyways, thanks, Michael Bailey. Enjoy having you liking the page, and I enjoy your shows. Back to the likes here. There's Quantum Sharon, Kevin Fortson, Ken Kimia, Stem 47, Kimite Gillespie, Fergmago. I hope I'm not pronouncing that too badly. I know we just talked about that over on the G.I. Joe Headcast behind the scenes. We discussed how to pronounce that name. Jeremy Richard, Taylor Mitchell, Christopher Cassell, Dave Kostiff, Steve J. Rogers, Clinton Robinson, Zeb Oswald, Mike Hodges, Charlie Niemeyer, Alan Middleton, Grover L. Welch, Corey Hodgson, Jim Beard, who I had a guest on over on the G.I. Joe Real American Headcast here a couple episodes ago. Gene Hendricks, who is an online podcasting buddy of mine. He's got the Quantum Cast show and the Hammer Strikes. I've been over on the Hammer Strikes. And he's also got a show called Comic Book Fight Club, which I've been on. A great guy, great podcast. Keith G. Baker, Van Z, Roger Preeb, Jared West, Mike Gillis, Michelle Moss, Ruth Sutherland, who I know has a podcast called Trekker Talk, Samantha Rusk, Russell Bragg, who also has his own podcast, DC Comics Presents, M. Anthony Gerardo, who I've talked about previously. He's got a Facebook group called Unite DC Comic Fans, Marvel One, a licensed comics adaptations page. Great guy, great pages, check them out. Dan Dughill, Gord Tolton, Lucas Garrett, Ryan Daly, who I believe I mentioned earlier. He is a co-host of mine over on the G.I. Joe, a Real American Speaks Headcast, and his Secret Origins podcast. Plus, he's got a couple of other, a Star Wars one, a Black Canary. Definitely a great guy, great podcaster. Michael Wagner, and the Irredeemable Shag, who is from Firestorm Fan, the Fire and Water Podcast Network, and another spiritual godfather to the show and my entire network. So, Anyways, those are the likes and comments and what have you for the Headcast Network. But I guess I've stalled enough. That's enough for today. We're going to go ahead and take off. As far as me, again, I'll be back next month with probably the third part of my musical interlude. And at some point, I'm going to start reviewing the Power of the Atom comic series and probably the Sword of the Atom, which came out before that. Because eventually that's all going to tie into the Suicide Squad book here around issue 50-ish or so, I believe it was. So before that, I'm going to review all those books that lead into it. Very tangentially, but I'm going to touch upon those books. That and I like the Atom, so... but as far as for further me, you can check me out over my other podcasts. Next week, the third week of the month, you can check out Task Force X, where I talk about the Suicide Squad and Checkmate. If I'm not mistaken, I'm up to issue 10 of Suicide Squad and the second issue of Checkmate. And then the following week is my new show, the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, where I'm up to the second issue of each book. And then join me for the first week in April when we rejoin for G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast. And then in 1 month, give or take, join us back here for the next episode of Head Speaks. And again, you can check out each show individually, or if you want, you can join up and sign up on iTunes for the Headcast Network. And that is the feed where all my shows will show up. If you want to hear all 4 of my shows, plus my daughter's occasional Alexa Speaks podcast. Also, for more of me, just recently released... a guy I've met online, a fan of the G.I. Joe Headcast show, Kevin Reitzel. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's got his own podcast, which is called the Fandom Podcast Network. And it's their first episode of their new show called Fandom Flashback. Sorry about that, Kevin. It's called Fandom Flashback. Him and his co-host Kyle, a different Kyle than the one I talk with on the G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast. But this podcast that they have, Fandom Flashback, they look at different shows, different whatever from the past. The first episode, they look at G.I. Joe. They talk with a couple people regarding G.I. Joe costuming for cosplayers. And then Kevin, Kyle, and myself talks a little bit about the G.I. Joe, a Real American Headcast. And we talk about the cartoon, the comics, the toys. Briefly, we cover a little bit of everything. So definitely check out Kevin's show. And also, as I mentioned here a couple episodes ago, I was on the Secret Origins podcast talking about Nightshade. And I should be showing up here in another month or two. And I almost forgot, before we go, we do have our Song of the Day, or the month, whatever you want to call it. This month, we're going to look at a song from Paul Hardcastle from 1985. It's called 19. I don't remember all the details on it now. I remember talking about the Vietnam War a bit, and it was just a great jam. We were sitting around my son's first birthday, me and a couple of friends talking, and one of them asked me, because I'm into old school rap and old school music like that, and he brought up, well, I remember this one song. They kept sounding about 19, the Vietnam War. Yeah, I remember it was 19. I can't remember who sung it, but I'm pretty sure the name of that song was 19. And talking to another friend of mine on Facebook, that again I know would know this stuff, he directed us to Paul Hardcastle. I was able to find the song online, so again, great memories. So enough about that. So the final song after the credits is from Paul Hardcastle. It was 1985. And the name of the song is called 19. I hope you guys enjoy it. So, until next month, remember, Head has spoken. Thank you for listening to another fantastic episode of Head Speaks. Hope you enjoyed it. If so, let me know. Drop me an email to head at headspeaks.com or visit our home at head.headspeaks.com. You can also visit and talk with me on Facebook and Google+, both under Head Speaks. You can also send an MP3 file with your thoughts, and I can play that on the air. And you can also get more of me on my other podcasts. Be sure to listen to Task Force X, where monthly I look at John Ossinger's Suicide Squad and Paul Kuppenberg's Checkmate comics from the 80s and early 90s. Also, over on G.I. Joe, A Real American Headcast, my podcasting friends Ryan Daly and Kyle Benning, along with myself, are looking at all of the G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero comics, and related titles from Marvel and IDW. All of my headcasts are available on iTunes and Stitcher, along with the respective blogs and my main page at headspeaks.com. All comments, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Head Speaks are owned wholly by the speaker of said comments, and do not express the opinions of Head Speaks, unless, of course, I'm the one making the comments. Head Speaks, Task Force X, and G.I. Joe, A Real American Headcast, are all part of the Headcast family. So, join us next month for another wonderful episode of Head Speaks. Until then, I'll see you in the funny pages. Good night.
They fought the longest war in American history. They fought the longest war in American history. In 1965, Vietnam seemed like just another foreign war. But it wasn't. It was different in many ways, and so were those who did the fighting. In World War II, the average age of the combat soldier was 26. In Vietnam, he was 19. 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 19.
The heaviest fighting of the past 2 weeks continued today, 25 miles northwest of Saigon.
I wasn't really sure what was going on. 19. In Vietnam, the combat soldier typically served a 12-month tour of duty, but was exposed to hostile fire almost every day. 19.
In Saigon, a U.S. military spokesman said today more than 700 enemy troops were killed last week in that sensitive border area. Throughout all of South Vietnam, the enemy lost a total of 2,689 soldiers.
Wearing somebody's brains around on your shirt because they got their head blown off right next to you. And that's not supposed to affect you. I can never understand. What would scare me is if we were to send a group of 18-year-olds 12,000 miles away and subject them to a year of that obscenity and have them not be affected. That's what would frighten me.
According to a Veterans Administration study, half of the Vietnam combat veterans suffer from what psychiatrists call post-traumatic stress disorder. Many vets complain of alienation, rage, or guilt. Some succumb to suicidal thoughts. 8 to 10 years after coming home, almost 800,000 men are still fighting the Vietnam War.
heroes welcome.
None of them. None of them.
Received the heroes welcome. None of them received the heroes welcome. None of them received the heroes welcome. None of them received the heroes welcome. I wasn't really sure what was going on.